Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. We live in a country where the President of the United States uses the power of the federal government now not to serve the people, but to get back at his enemies. Donald Trump is now claiming complete authority over the Department of Justice, saying he has the right to direct a criminal investigation whenever and wherever he wants to. The president quoted Attorney General Barr today as saying, "The president has never asked me to do anything in a criminal case." But more ominously, Trump then goes on to say, "This doesn't mean I do not have, as president, the legal right to do so. I do, but I have chosen so far not to." Well, this is a blunt assertion of unitary executive power that's seldom, if ever, been heard from an American president. And it comes in response to a rare rebuke from Attorney General Bill Barr, who told Trump yesterday to stop tweeting and talking about cases before the Department of Justice.
You know, I cannot do my job here at the department with a constant background commentary that undercuts me. That's why I think it's time to stop the tweeting about Department of Justice criminal cases.
Well, Trump's decision today to ignore the Attorney General's plea follows his public effort this week to exert control over the Justice Department for political purposes. The president lobbied for a reduced sentencing recommendation for his longtime political advisor, Roger Stone. And when the Justice Department did just that, he attacked the prosecutors who quit the case. And then he tried to intimidate the federal judge who will decide Stone's fate next week. And last but not least, he attacked the leading member of the jury in the case. And despite the Attorney General's public rebuke of Trump, Barr's work at the Justice Department still appears closely aligned, don't you think, with the president's political purposes. Today, the New York Times was first to report that, according to people familiar with the matter, Barr has assigned an outside prosecutor now to scrutinize the criminal case against Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. According to this report, the move is highly unusual and could trigger more accusations of political interference by the president. I'm joined right now by Charlie Savage, Washington correspondent for the New York Times. Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Mika Ouyang is vice president of the Third Way National Security Program. And Charlie Sykes is editor-at-large at The Bulwark. Let me start with Charlie Savage. What would the president be up to here with Michael Flynn? Is he trying to spring him?
Well, so to lay this out to your listeners just a little bit more, what we've learned is that 2 weeks ago, when Attorney General Barr installed an interim U.S. attorney here in Washington over the office that has all the politically contentious cases, because it oversees the seat of federal government, has the Roger Stone case, has the Michael Flynn case, was considering whether to charge James Comey, and probably a lot of other things we don't know about. He also sent in an outside team of prosecutors, some from St. Louis, some from the Deputy Attorney General's office, to impose a new layer of supervisory review over all the career attorneys who are handling these politically charged cases, to basically be in a position to second-guess and micromanage those cases. Whether Trump knew this was happening or whether Barr was doing this on his own is an open question, but it's extremely unusual, and it's part of the reason that that office was already in an uproar before this happened with Roger Stone and the pulling back of the sentencing guidelines recommendation that led those 4 attorneys to quit the case.
Charlie Sykes, are we seeing a corrupting of the Justice Department here, where the president and his attorney general, who sort of walks in lockstep with him, thinks that way, acts that way, are out there to basically use the Justice Department to clear all his political lieutenants?
Yes, and there's nothing stealthy about this. This is the thing about Donald Trump, is that he says the quiet part out loud. He's made no secret of the fact that his vision of the presidency is that the Constitution gives him the power to do anything that he wants, which includes attacking, harassing, indicting his political enemies, cutting slack to his political cronies. And he's had an attorney general who's been willing to do all of that. So, as this revenge tour escalates after his acquittal on impeachment, I guess the only surprising thing is how blatant it is. So, I see Bill Barr not as breaking with the president, but simply as CYA saying, look, I'm doing everything you want. I'm protecting your buddies, your cronies, your friends. I'm attacking your enemies. But it's embarrassing if you give away the game by announcing it on Twitter.
We've often talked in my generation about the advantages of Watergate because it scared us into how rotten a system could get, with John Mitchell as the president's buddy and former law partner running the show, basically being behind Watergate. But since Watergate, the idea was that the AG was an independent force in the country, an honest judiciary.
Yeah, look, we've really seen a breakdown of these norms. We have the independence of the FBI, the 10-year term. We've done a lot of things to try and insulate our law enforcement apparatus from political influence. And what we're seeing here is all those lessons post-Watergate, this administration is not interested in them at all. They want their hands really on all the levers, making all the decisions, you know, letting their friends off, starting investigations of the people who are causing them trouble. This is exactly the kind of corruption that our government was trying to fight in Ukraine. We were trying to say, you can't do this kind of using the prosecution to hurt your enemies.
Well, as Trump, I just mentioned, Trump's tweet this morning asserted his authority to interfere with the Department of Justice, even though he still denies actually doing it. It's not the first time the president's denied accusations of improper conduct, while at the same time claiming he had absolute right to engage in such conduct. Here goes the run.
I never told Don McGahn to fire Mueller. If I wanted to fire Mueller, I would have done it myself. It's very simple. I had the right to. And frankly, whether I did or he did, we had the absolute right to fire Mueller. In the meantime, I didn't do it. And there'd be nothing wrong if I did say it, according to everybody that I've read today. But I did not say that.
It's not even under campaign finance. Number two, if it was, it's not even a violation. There was no pressure put on them whatsoever. I put no pressure on them whatsoever. I could have. I think it would probably, possibly have been okay if I did. But I didn't. I didn't put any pressure on them whatsoever.
Yamiche, let's talk about the unitary theory of the president's having power over all the executive branches of government. Everything in the government, including the Justice Department, is under his thumb. Well, where did he get that idea from?
Well, I think the issue is that there are two things. There's the norms and traditions, and then there's what's illegal and what's legal. Based on my conversations from former DOJ officials, it's legal for the president to be as chummy as he wants to be with the attorney general. I put a question to so many, both conservative and liberal people in the Justice Department, and said, what's the hypothetical? If President Trump calls up AG Barr and says, change the sentencing for my friend, is that illegal? Both of them said no. All of them said no. The issue, though, is...
How powerful do they think they are, theoretically? Could the president say, let that guy go, he's a pal of mine? Can actually, it sounds like he could do that.
It sounds like, based on my reporting and my conversations with people, that that's actually legal. The issue, though, is norms and traditions. In America, most times, historically, presidents have said there needs to be a little bit of distance between me and the Justice Department to be able to do that little J justice. So as part of that, what we see now is the president who's been emboldened after being acquitted of being impeached, and a Republican Party that's basically given him the go-ahead to do some of the things that we've heard him do with Ukraine and with China. And as a result, he feels more emboldened to be able to say, yeah, I can tweet about this if I want to. Obviously, you see Attorney General Barr saying, let's keep this a little bit lower than Twitter.
And now we get to what's really the president's MO, which goes beyond some unitary constitutional theory that a president can tell the DOJ whatever to do. Michigan Congressman Justin Amash, a former Republican turned independent member of Congress, criticized Trump's claim today, saying it follows a standard Trump progression. Amash says that Trump first claims, I didn't do it. And then it becomes, I didn't do it, but I could do it. And then it becomes, I did do it, so what? And finally, I did do it, and it was right to do it. Mika, this guy is unbelievable. I'm going to go to Charlie Sykes. Charlie, this does remind me of the early 50s with the communists, or alleged communists, who say, I'm not a communist, but if I am, so what? I have a right to be. It's like, what are you? What's your point here? Your thoughts?
No, I think Justin Amash is absolutely right there, because we've seen this pattern before. And the really frightening thing, as Yamiche points out, that these are norms. There is nothing in the Constitution. There is no statutory prohibition. So if the president wants to go full authoritarian, what stands against him? We know that the Justice Department so far has not been standing against him. We know that the Republicans in Congress won't. So this is a genuinely alarming moment. I guess this is one of those moments when you want to, put up a red flag and say, this is the essence of the attack on the rule of law. This may not be technically a constitutional crisis, but this is the essence of authoritarianism, when the president claims that he has this untrammeled right to basically say, yeah, I want you to go after this person. I want to punish punish my enemies, and I want to let my friends off the hook. Look, and by the way, we know how this is going to end. He's going to pardon Flynn. He's going to pardon Manafort. He will pardon Roger Stone. And at the end of the day, we know that he's going to do all of this. And quite frankly, this is one of those moments where we have to look in the mirror and go, okay, you know, are we still a nation of laws?
You know, we've had such a difference among attorney generals. I remember reporting on this, digging it up for history purposes, that Joe Kennedy Sr., the father of the president, said, I want Bobby, your brother, to be attorney general because I want him to look out for you. That's why he was put there. And then you had a case under Clinton, which was so clean. Janet Reno, every time Clinton called up, she would say, let me get my notebook, so she could record very formally the conversation. And now we have a president who seems to be a synchronized swimmer with an attorney general who knows what, like a good butler, knows exactly what the boss wants. Yeah. Or thinks like the boss so much.
Yeah, and it's very, I mean, the thing is, it is all happening out in the open. It's not like this is some sort of secret pact, and it's very clear as to what what the Attorney General is doing here and what the President wants, and that the Attorney General is following his guidance. I don't think that they're trying to hide this at all.
A part of what
Charlie,
well, I just want to say, important, though, for your viewers to know that today the Justice Department announced there were not going to be charges against Andrew McCabe, the former acting FBI director, who's one of Trump's enemies, one of the people he's vilified for his role in the Russia investigation. And so this is an example coming one day after Barr said, back off, you can't be telling me what to do.
Is he showing independence here?
It's certainly sending a signal of a nonpartisan use of this power. Is it cynical? We're going to do this one thing and then we can get away with all the other things? Or is it genuine? Is Trump going to blow up at Barr or accept this? This is the thing to watch now. But in this conversation, knowing that Barr, having gone out and fired this shot against Trump's bow, then did the opposite of what President Trump clearly wanted on McCabe is a hugely important fact.
Well, we'll see. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates blasted the president, a scathing Washington Post op-ed today. She writes that, quote, from virtually the moment he took office, President Trump has attempted to use the Department of Justice as a cudgel against his enemies and as a shield for himself and his allies. Detailing the president's misconduct, Yates warns that with every blow, the wall of justice independence has wobbled a bit more, saying that this week it teetered on the verge of collapse. Yes, Yamiche?
This is what I will say about the president. I think that he has this political, some people would say genius, some people would say it's outlandish, that the president says things that are so openly that go against the norms, but that he isn't afraid to kind of just air it out there. Case in point, I go back to when he said, you know, China should go after and look at Hunter Biden. That took all the wind out of it because it was the Ukraine call that everyone was talking about, except that it was happening on the White House lawn. Now you have the president tweeting. He could tweet as soon as we get off this show. He could tweet, you know what, Andrew McCabe should have been prosecuted. I wish that would happen. What you have is the president basically telling Attorney General Barr, fine, you can do this, you can go on TV, but remember who's in charge here. I will say whatever I want to say. And you have a Republican Party that basically says the president is the person, he can do whatever he wants.
Charlie Sykes, how's that work politically? How does that translate to the person out there voting later this year on the president's reelection? That he can be so bold that it's not just he breaks laws, he ignores them and speaks publicly about how he's doing it in a way that's so, you could say, outlandish that somehow it seems strong, just simply strong.
Yeah. Well, among the Trump base, there'll be people who will say that, look, he's draining the swamp and getting things done. And this, by the way, is something that is also, I think, terrifying, which is that leaving aside what Donald Trump is doing, what is he doing to the American political culture? Are Republicans now going to accept this idea that the presidency, the imperial presidency, can basically punish you, use the Department of Justice as a cudgel, use it as a shield for your friends? Are they going to buy into that? Because if they do, then the culture that has undergirded all of these norms and traditions will have been badly damaged. Once that genie is out of the bottle, can we put it back in?
Let me ask you a political question, just really simple, fill in the blanks. Who do the Trump people out there in the country, the real voters, the 90% of the Republican Party that wants to get Trump back in again next time, who do they want him to run against? Which Democrat or whatever do they want to be his main challenger come November? Charlie,
asking me?
Charlie Sykes. You, sir.
Oh, no. Yeah, no question about it. Oh, no question about it. Bernie Sanders. I mean, every Republican that I've talked to thinks that Bernie Sanders would be the ideal candidate to run against, because they think that, look, you have a lot of swing voters in places like Wisconsin who, might be willing to be, look at a centrist Democrat. But if you're going full radical Democrat socialist, that's going to be the deal breaker for a lot of swing voters.
Thank you so much, Charlie Sykes. Thank you, Charlie Savage. Thank you, Mika Oyang. You guys seems like Friday night people around here. Anyway, Charlie and Mika Oyang, thank you. It's great to end the week with you. And come, and Yamish Alcindor, thank you. Welcome back to Hardball. Emboldened, you might say, in the 9 days since his acquittal by the U.S. Senate on 2 articles of impeachment, President Trump is now admitting to his misconduct out in the open, as we said, out in the open now. In a radio interview yesterday with Geraldo Rivera, Trump acknowledged that he sent his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, to Ukraine to dig up dirt on his political rivals.
Was it strange to send Rudy Giuliani to Ukraine, your personal lawyer? Are you sorry you did that?
Not at all. Rudy was a great crime fighter. You know that maybe better than anybody.
Yeah,
and Rudy
I interviewed him.
And
I
Rudy
was the
is
first one
totally
to
on his
interview.
game. Rudy's on his game. Rudy was a great crime fighter.
Well, Geraldo's a lawyer, too, and he led Trump right into it, but Trump seemed to want to do it. He wanted to admit that he did something he's been denying for months. That contradicts what he just said to Geraldo. His own repeated denials during the impeachment investigation itself, they had anything to do with Giuliani's trip to Ukraine. Here's what he told, for example, Bill O'Reilly back in November.
What was Rudy Giuliani doing in Ukraine on your behalf?
Well, you have to ask that to Rudy, but Rudy, I don't even know. I know he was going to go to Ukraine, and I think he canceled the trip. But Rudy has other clients other than me. I'm one.
So you didn't direct him to go there on your behalf. You didn't.
No, but you have to understand. Rudy is a great corruption fighter.
No, I didn't send him. Well, in an interview yesterday with Rivera, the president said he tapped Giuliani for the role because the American intelligence community, he said, left him with a bad taste.
So when you tell me about Rudy, so here's my choice. I deal with the Comeys of the world, or I deal with it. In other words, I was given a very bad taste of our intelligence department. And one of the thing about Rudy, number one, he was the best prosecutor, one of the very best prosecutors and the best mayor. But also, other presidents had him. FDR had a lawyer who was practically, was totally involved with government. Eisenhower had a lawyer. They all had lawyers.
For more, I'm joined by U.S. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois, who serves on the House Intelligence Committee, and, of course, Cynthia Axne, former federal prosecutor. Thank you. You two should be able to handle this. First of all, the political or psychological. Why is the president now so hubristic, so proud of himself, so freedom-minded that he doesn't care what he says? He's now saying what he's apparently lied about for months, that Rudy Giuliani was his man in Ukraine. Congressman.
Well, I think that he's emboldened because he was acquitted. And, this follows a typical pattern for the president where he first denies that he did anything. And then he later says, even if I did do it, it wouldn't be wrong. And then later he says, I did it. So what? As I think Congressman Amash pointed out before. And that's what's going on here. He clearly sent Rudy Giuliani to Ukraine to conduct these investigations. And the new piece of news that we learned today is that apparently not only is Giuliani continuing these investigations, but the DOJ under Barr has set up some kind of special back channel where he can provide this information to the DOJ. I think I heard the office in Pittsburgh is somehow receiving this information, which is very, very disturbing to say the least.
Well, Cynthia, what do you make of that suggestion box or dirt box in the DOJ out in Pittsburgh, where if Giuliani has got some dirt or smear he wants to do on one of the president's enemies or rivals, he can just throw it in the box and throw it into the system?
Right, it's amazing. It's just amazing that the FBI isn't involved. You know, it didn't occur to anybody that we have an entire criminal justice system that handles situations, but instead the president likes his buddy Giuliani, and it's not working any other way, and they don't like the prosecutors that they've had in the past that have said there's nothing to any of this. And so Barr has gone forum shopping. He not only is looking for attorneys to come in to work with Giuliani, but now he's also bringing in special groups to overlook the Flynn case, and he's trying to get do-overs on anything that the president's not happy with. You know, Andrew McCabe today, they couldn't get an indictment on McCabe, and so they said that he wasn't going to be prosecuted. Meanwhile, we find out they're bringing in other lawyers to relook at the whole situation, and it's a bait and switch. So it's so sad for those of us who love the Department of Justice to watch as an entire generation of children, of millennials and the new generations are reared in a world in which the Department of Justice is a political weapon and not a place where justice is administered fairly and impartially.
Congressman, what do you make of the fact he's out there going after his enemies, using Rudy Giuliani to dig up dirt or to smear people he doesn't like Joe Biden and his family, and also the fact he's out there apparently reviewing all these cases where he might be able to spring one of his Trump's people, like Flynn?
I think it's deeply disturbing. I think at this point in Congress and the House specifically, we have to exercise aggressive oversight in a way that perhaps we didn't do even before. I think that, you know, these folks at the DOJ are going to come to us for more money. They're going to come to us for new programs. They're going to come to us for modifications of old programs. And I suspect that my colleagues, especially on the Judiciary Committee and other committees, are going to condition some of what they asked for on, quote-unquote, good behavior. And we're not seeing it right now, to say the least.
And that's going to happen, you believe? You're going to basically squeeze him a little, or basically punish him a little, Congressman?
I think that at this point, we cannot have taxpayer dollars aiding in lawlessness. This is misconduct, you know, with a big M. And I think at this point, we have to do whatever it takes to, you know, prevent the worst excesses from happening further.
Well, during the president's Senate impeachment trial, the trial part, House Manager Hakeem Jeffries of New York warned of the potential consequences of acquitting the president for abusing his power and soliciting a personal benefit.
And if this Senate were to say that's acceptable, then precisely as was outlined in that question could take place all across America. The president could say, you're not going to get that money, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. County Executive, Mrs. Town Supervisor, unless you endorse me. The president could say that to any governor of our 50 states. That's unacceptable. That cannot be allowed to happen in our democratic republic.
Well, that's one of the heroes, of course, of the House operation, the investigation, of course, the Senate trial, Hakeem Jeffries of New York. And now the president is being accused of looking for a quid pro quo with the state of New York. He suggested a link between his administration's decision to bar New Yorkers from joining trusted traveler programs like Global Entry and the state's investigations into his personal finances. Get it? Quid pro quo. They shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to punish them. Ahead of a meeting with Governor Andrew Cuomo just yesterday, Trump tweeted, he must understand that national security far exceeds politics, adding New York must stop all of its unnecessary lawsuits and harassment. Cynthia, what do you make of that little quid pro quo? The president's making it more difficult for New York State citizens to travel because he doesn't like sanctuary cities or he doesn't like their prosecution of him.
Right, exactly. And he's tweeted before that they're too interested in his lawsuits and his investigations. It also shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the way our government works. I mean, Governor Cuomo is not in charge of those lawsuits. That's the Attorney General. He just doesn't understand how things work. He believes what was said in the impeachment trial, which is anything that is in his interest is acceptable. That's essentially what the argument was at his impeachment trial. And that's what he believes. And I agree with the congressman. They're going to have to be much more aggressive. All the people involved involved at DHS in shutting down these trusted traveler programs. They should be in the Congress this week. Those United States attorneys who were forced to resign because of the Stone case, they should be in Congress next week. We need to shut down financially the Department of Justice. We need to be more aggressive, and we haven't been enough.
Thank you so much, Cynthia Oxley. Of course, U.S. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. Thank you, sir, for coming us from Illinois. Welcome back to Hardball. With only 8 days now until the Nevada caucuses, candidates are already setting their sights beyond the Silver State to South Carolina, and of course, Super Tuesday coming soon thereafter. Today, only former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Amy Klobuchar are on the ground in Nevada. A new Las Vegas Review Journal poll has Sanders leading out there at 25% in Nevada, followed by Biden at 18%. He's holding up there. Elizabeth Warren at 13%. She's holding up. Tom Steyer's up to 11%, and Pete Buttigieg and Klobuchar each down at 10%. So it doesn't look like now like New Hampshire looked. While Sanders leads in Nevada, today he's making his pitch to voters in the delegate-rich Super Tuesday states of Texas and North Carolina, where he got in a dig against Mike Bloomberg.
The other reason that we're going to win is, I think, all across this country, people understand there is something wrong when we have a corrupt political system that allows billionaires to buy elections. Now, we may be old-fashioned. What we believe in is democracy, one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections.
Well, Buttigieg is also focusing his attention on Super Tuesday states. Today, he's holding multiple events in California. And that state has the largest number of delegates, of course, 415 delegates. And as Buttigieg makes his case for the nomination, Trump and his allies are focusing their attention on him, not about his policies, but about him being gay. You won't believe it. And that's coming up next. You're watching Hardball.
We have this my way or the highway politics that suggests to people that, if you're not with me, you must be against me. If you're not for the revolution, you must be for the status quo. And I think most of us don't see ourselves in that picture. I've heard some people say that, my experience is not relevant because you have to have a Washington experience in order to become a president. We have to look at what kind of judgment that experience has brought.
Well, here he comes, and welcome back to Hardball. That was former Mayor Pete Buttigieg last night in Las Vegas criticizing, though not by name, Senators Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar. And while Pete Buttigieg, is campaigning out west, President Trump and his allies are questioning whether the country's ready to have an openly gay man in the White House. The Washington Post calls it a possible sign of things to come. I'd say that's true. Here's what the president and his allies had to say.
They've got to be saying, despite all the great ground that's been covered, America's still not ready to elect a gay guy kissing his husband on the debate stage president.
What Limbaugh was talking about, and again, the way he said it is different than I would obviously say it. He's saying there are Democrats that are sitting there worried that this is going to be a bigger issue.
Would Americans vote for a gay man to be president?
I think so. I think there would be some that wouldn't, and, I wouldn't be among that group, to be honest with you.
To be honest with you, there's an interesting phrase by this president, to be honest with you. What's that mean? From our job, Michelle Goldberg, the great columnist for the New York Times, and E.J. Jones, columnist for the Washington Post, and author of a great new book, Code Red. Sounds scary how progressives and moderates can unite to save our country. Thank you both. Let's start with this red meat. Michelle, why would people like Rush Limbaugh, who goes from 12 to 3 Eastern time, not travel time, not commuter time. I always thought he'd pick noon so you get the people that are just, well, a certain crowd. Anyway, your thoughts. Why would that be good for his audience? Why would he stoke up the anti-gay sentiment?
I mean, Rush Limbaugh is a bully and a bigot who a lot of people probably best know for calling a college student a slut because she wanted health insurance to cover her birth control, right? I mean, of course Rush Limbaugh is going to gay bait Pete Buttigieg. Rush Limbaugh always goes for the lowest common denominator in his attack on his political enemies. I mean, you probably remember his song about Barack Obama. I think it was Barack the Magic Negro, right? I mean, Rush Limbaugh, that's his stock and trade. Beyond that, I think that, Rush Limbaugh has long been this tribune of aggrieved and resentful masculinity, a generation of white men that is angry about their declining privilege, a sentiment that basically propelled Trump to the White House. And so, of course, they're going to play the gender card against either a gay candidate or a woman candidate.
Most people today, EJ, you don't have to be a liberal to believe that your orientation comes from your birth, your God, from God. You don't decide, remember Trent Lott famously said you choose your orientation like around 12 years old or 15 years old.
It's go to Walmart.
It's like I'll make a decision. But why would the man who just got the Medal of Freedom put him around his neck by Melania Trump at the State of the Union address go right to this level?
Because that's why he got the Medal of Freedom. He got the Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump because he has recited and indeed, let's give him credit, invented some of the most important and often nasty right-wing talking points we've seen in the last 30 years. And I think in a way, this is welcome to the big time Pete Buttigieg, because the fact that the right wing now feels they need to attack Pete Buttigieg by saying the country won't vote for a gay man shows that he is now a very serious candidate.
Yes.
And that this works, I think, only for much, much older voters, because the country has swung around on this issue faster, really, than on almost any other issue in our history.
We got bigger things to worry about.
You bet.
Meanwhile, in a rally in Manchester earlier this week, the president tried to sow discord by claiming that the chaos in Iowa last week, and it was chaotic, was the Democratic Party trying to steal the election from Bernie Sanders.
Does anybody know who won Iowa?
Nobody knows who won. Actually, I think they're trying to take it away from Bernie again. I think Bernie came in second. Can you believe it? They're doing it to you again, Bernie. They're doing it to you again.
It's the same playbook he used, the president did in 2016 when he argued the Democratic Party had rigged the primary results against Sanders. Here he goes, or here he was.
Bernie Sanders, it was a rigged deal. The whole thing is one big fix. Bernie, the system was rigged. Bernie Sanders with the superdelegates, I mean, that whole deal was also rigged.
I watched Bernie Sanders work. Poor old Bernie. He's working. And I said, I think the system's rigged. You know, the superdelegates. What happened to Bernie? Where is he? What happened?
So there were crocodile tears if I ever saw them. Michelle, what's he up to?
Well, he obviously thinks he can divide the Democratic Party and play on the suspicions of, kind of the people who are most disaffected from the party establishment. I also think, it's pretty clear that Donald Trump wants to run against Bernie Sanders. That might not necessarily be the right political judgment. There was a lot of Democrats in 2016 that wanted to run against Donald Trump, right? And so I'm not saying that his judgment is right, but I think that it's pretty clear that conservatives think that if Bernie Sanders gets the nomination, that'll be their easiest path to Trump's reelection.
EJ, you're the opposite of this president. You're trying to unite. This book's about uniting. How do you do it?
Well, in fact, I think that what Trump said is why I wrote this book. Because if progressives and moderates spend their time tearing each other's hair out over differences that are tiny compared to the differences both of them have together with Donald Trump and an increasingly radicalized Republican Party, he's going to win, and he knows that. What I argue in the book is that progressives and moderates broadly want to move in the right direction and in the same direction. And whether you're for single-payer health care or for the public option, you want to make sure everybody has health insurance. That's usually different from the other side. Another point I make is about the power of negative thinking, and that progressives and moderates need to think about how Ronald Reagan used three big antis, anti-tax, anti-government, anti-communism, to construct a whole ideology and really dominate our public thinking for about 30 years. And what Trump represents, his attack on immigrants and refugees, his attack on democracy, these are things that they both sides believe we got to fight against.
Okay. Great writer, great man. E.J. Dionne, academic, thoughtful leader. Thank you so much. Michelle Goldberg, Welcome back to Hardball. Today marks 2 years, actually the 2-year anniversary, but it's not really something to celebrate, since the devastating shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Remember that word, Parkland? That tragedy and the numerous other mass shootings in this country have occurred since, have made comprehensive gun reform a main issue in the 2020 campaign trail. And the Democratic candidates appear to be unified on it, believe it or not. Here they are.
Well, one of the biggest issues we have to face is gun violence in this country.
Getting it done means passing sensible gun safety laws that protect our children and communities.
There is no excuse for us to go one day longer without acting to make sure that the Second Amendment can no longer be twisted into an excuse to do nothing at all when it comes to gun violence.
We need national background checks of our guns. We need to get weapons of war off our streets.
My promise to you is that our gun policy will be written by the American people, not the NRA.
But President Trump appears to have gone in the opposite direction. As the Associated Press notes, quote, as he primes the pump on this 2020 re-election effort, Trump is going all out on embracing the mantle of gun rights champion, a stark turn from earlier moments in his presidency when he toyed with the idea of pushing Congress to enact stricter gun controls. I'm joined now by Kylan Hunter, Vice President for Programs at the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. Kylan, here's your chance. Use this medium. Talk to the Democratic candidates on gun control.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here tonight. And I think first and foremost, what is encouraging is actually seeing the fact that every single Democratic candidate is putting gun violence prevention front and center in their campaign. And it's clear because this is something that the American people are demanding. The American people are sick of seeing their children mowed down in schools. They're sick of being afraid to go to concerts or to the mall or to places of worship. And so when we're thinking about what they can actually do, we know first and foremost that expanding the Brady background check system is a no-brainer. Over 90% of the American people support this. Bills H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112 passed out of the House with bipartisan support. These close a lot of the gun show loopholes. They close the Charleston loophole. They are going to keep Americans safer. So number one, get those through right now, background checks. But beyond that, extreme risk protective orders. These are proven to keep guns out of the hands of people that are a risk to themselves or others. It would have stopped this tragedy that we saw at Parkland had an extreme protective order. So that's if I am someone who is saying that I want to go shoot up a school, much like this Parkland shooter actually did, who is known by the authorities to want to go do this, you could enact an extreme risk protective order, which temporarily either takes guns away from someone or prevents them from going to get new ones so that they can go get the help they need. When we talk about this being a mental health issue often, yes, there's mental health, but it's also an access to guns issue. People who are in mental health crises, if they're able to go get help, don't go shoot up schools. If they aren't able to go get help, but they are able to go get a gun, they're going to go shoot up a school, and that's unacceptable.
Well, throughout his presidency, President Trump has promised to act on gun violence. Here he goes.
I can speak for all of the senators and congressmen and congresswomen, all of the people in this room that are involved in this decision, that we will act. We will do something. We will act. My government will not rest until we have done everything in our power to reduce violent crime and to protect innocent life.
It's a terrible, terrible thing what's going on with hate in our country, frankly, and all over the world. And something has to be done. Something has to be done.
Well, after the August shootings in Dayton and El Paso, there had been discussion between Trump and Democrats on gun control, but those appeared to stop as the House started to look into Trump's call with the Ukrainian president. Trump tweeted at that time, the Democrats are so focused on hurting the Republican Party and the president that they are unable to get anything done because of it, including legislation on gun safety. So he laid it on the Democrats.
Which is a completely unfair and unacceptable charge. This is an American issue. This is not a partisan issue. It should not be a partisan issue, I should say, actually. It is something that is supported by all Americans. And he can act right now. We have repeatedly called on him to tell Mitch McConnell to take up H.R. 8 and 1112 that the House passed as a start to save lives.
So basically, better background checks, more comprehensive, and find out people who really are in danger and making sure they don't get guns.
Correct. And then also renew the federal assault weapons ban.
Okay, thank you. Kyle and Hunter, thank you so much. Up next, the pathos of a concession speech. You're watching Hardball. I'm a romantic about politics. I like it when a person stands up there for what he or she believes and accepts the consequences. I think the great moment of truth can be the concession speech, when the candidate is told it's over, and they have 15 minutes to get up on that stage in front of their supporters and say they've come up short. And sometimes the concession speech is more memorable than the one by the victor. Here's an example you might hold dear. The man speaking is Governor Adlai Stevenson after losing the presidency to Dwight D. Eisenhower in November of 1952.
Abraham Lincoln. And they asked him how he felt once after an unsuccessful election. We want Adlai! He said he felt like a little boy who had stubbed his toe in the dark. That he was too old to cry, but it hurt too much to laugh.
The great Adlai Stevenson. Here are two candidates giving it up this week. First, Andrew Yang.
I stand before you tonight and say that while we did not win this election, we are just getting started. This is the beginning. This movement is the future of American politics. This movement is the future of the Democratic Party.
And Colorado Senator Michael Bennet.
Tonight is not going to be our night, but let me say this to New Hampshire. You may see me once again. I got in this race because I love our country. I love America. I love the idea of democracy, and I want to make sure that that our generation passes this democracy intact, at least, and if not in better shape, to the next generation of Americans.
Well, not always poetic, of course, but generally truthful. Sometimes the best speech of the campaign. And that's Hardball for now. Hardball for now. Happy Valentine's Day, especially to the guys that dropped out. All in with Chris Hayes starts right now.